Right now, Russia is losing grip everywhere. In Crimea, the occupiers are trapped what was once their fortress is now turning into a pit they can't hold. In Europe, chaos struck the skies. Mystery drones forced Copenhagen Airport to shut down, grounding flights and diverting dozens of planes. From Washington, Trump made a bold promise: Ukraine can restore its 1991 borders. Full victory is possible. And at the UN, Zelensky lays it out clearly: stronger air defense will force Putin to back for a ceasefire. Welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Zaroslava Kolesnikova, and in this episode we uncover Russia's panic, Ukraine's power, and the West's next big moves. Crimea turning into pit for occupiers. Russia can't hold on. The Russians are in deep trouble in Crimea. Ukrainian defense forces keep striking, and the more time passes, the more painful surprises await the occupiers. Step by step, Crimea is turning into what soldiers call Crimea, a place where Russia's army is broken down piece by piece. How long can Moscow hold on before Crimea slips completely out of its grip? Full story in report.
The Russians are clearly having problems in Crimea, and the further it goes, the more surprises await the enemy.
Crimea is gradually, if we draw an analogy, thanks to the Ukrainian defense forces turning into, well, something like Crimea, by analogy with Chornobaivka, yes, where the Russian army, Russian occupiers, and accordingly their weapons and equipment are constantly being destroyed.
Ukrainian defenders have a clear understanding of where the Russian occupiers are located in occupied Crimea and are doing everything possible to drive them out.
There is active work being done in Crimea. The process of demilitarizing Crimea is ongoing. This is an integral part of the deoccupation process.
In temporarily occupied Crimea, there are increasing problems with fuel, water, and military equipment. Ukrainian strikes are destroying enemy bases, while the Russians are trying to conceal the scale of their losses. We are talking about ground, air, and naval operations that our defenders are successfully carrying out.
Today, the Russian military facilities in Crimea that came under attack, let me emphasize, military facilities, are those that pose a threat not only to the peninsula itself, because they are located there, but also directly threaten other regions of our country. This critical equipment is currently being actively used to launch devastating missile strikes on our sovereign territory, and accordingly, it is precisely what enables the Russians to conduct extensive and thorough reconnaissance of our precious airspace.
Enemy air defense facilities are being regularly eliminated, naval targets are being destroyed, and ground targets are being struck, including railway infrastructure.
The air defense systems in Crimea, which are currently operating very actively and trying to repel strikes by Ukrainian defense forces, are not succeeding at all. They are also being used as instruments of killing.
Problems with supplies are growing on the peninsula, and the Russians' defensive positions are collapsing.
Work is also underway on those key points that will open the door to Crimea for us, in particular the Kinburn Spit, the Jarilhak Spit, and of course the territory of Crimea itself.
Almost every week, the destruction of Russian helicopters or air defense elements is recorded. This creates an atmosphere of fear among the occupiers and forces them to conserve resources. Ukrainian drones have even reached the government dachas. On the night of September 22nd, explosions were heard in the Foros area. Russian collaborators reported that drones struck the territory of the Foros sanatorium. It was reported that 3 people were killed and 16 were injured.
It is quite likely that this very guest house was the meeting place for, well, high-ranking officials, possibly from the FSB or quite possibly the armed forces of the Russian Federation. But we still haven't seen any objective monitoring, so-called, from the Russian side regarding the dead and wounded civilians. And that's the first thing the Russian Federation would have done if that were really the case.
The Russians kept silent about the fact that there were very important guests at the sanatorium at the time of the attack. Exactly who they were is not specified. A notice was posted on the sanatorium's social media page stating that on September 21st, the Foros Hall restaurant would be closed for special service. All the news is showing the school, which is located nearby.
The assembly hall of the school suffered the most damage. Here, part of the ceiling has collapsed. Just look at what's left of one of the walls. From the damage, it's clear that the drone flew in through this window. Now there are fragments scattered everywhere here.
The Russians tried to use this school for propaganda, which was closed on the weekend, no students, nothing, to cover up their latest terrorist attacks on our country. This is what the Russians always do. But again, it's not really about hitting the school itself, it's about the boarding house, also named Terletsky, which is located across from the school.
Nearby is also government dacha number 11, the Zarya facility. There's a helicopter pad here, so the FSO is always present and can be called in to secure meetings.
We are demonstrating that today our defense forces, with various means of firepower, can reach the occupiers anywhere in our Crimea, anywhere in the north, in the south, in the west, in the east. And today there is not a single facility in Crimea that cannot be struck by our defense forces. Russian air defense has once again proven its ineffectiveness. They are incapable of protecting either Russia or the temporarily occupied territories. In other words, Crimea's air defense system is being destroyed, and this is the path to the demilitarization of Crimea, and most importantly, its deoccupation. We are on the right track.
The Russian aircraft fleet on the occupied peninsula has been reduced as a result of the successful combat operations of the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Special Unit, GHOSTs. 3 enemy Mi-8 multi-purpose helicopters were hit, as well as the expensive Russian radar station Nebo-U.
4 helicopters were destroyed in just a few days, along with 2 unique amphibious B-12 Chaika aircraft. There are actually very few of them in the Black Sea Fleet, if I'm not mistaken, only 6. And now 2 of them have already been destroyed.
Reconnaissance units showed compelling footage of the entire operation and detailed video of the extensive wreckage of one of the completely destroyed helicopters. Occupied Crimea has become a symbol of the fuel collapse. A large amount of fuel was brought here to refuel Russian military equipment. As a result, there is now a shortage and record-high fuel prices on the peninsula. The rise in gasoline prices is linked to Ukraine's strikes on Russian oil refineries. The video shows Sevastopol. In Yalta, gasoline was delivered to one of the gas stations. The line of people wanting to refuel is simply enormous. Neither the Russian authorities nor the occupation authorities in Crimea admit there is a problem. They insist that it's just a matter of logistics. Instances of human rights violations in Crimea are regularly documented and submitted to the UN Human Rights Council and the OSCE. The Russian occupation administration is forcibly conscripting Crimeans into the ranks of the Russian armed forces. Refusal to serve is punishable by criminal prosecution. In addition, there is ongoing militarization of children. The Crimean Peninsula eagerly awaits its rightful return, and the nation of Ukraine is steadfastly not allowing the Russian Federation to normalize its illegal occupation of the territory.
Mystery drones shut down Copenhagen Airport. Flights divert. Chaos in Northern Europe. On the night of September 22, unknown drones forced Denmark and Norway to raise the alarm. In Copenhagen, Denmark's busiest airport was shut down as drones entered the airspace. More than 35 flights were delivered, pressured and landing stopped, and security forces rushed to respond. Who sent these drones and what is the test of NATO's defenses? Full story in our report.
Unknown drones attacked Denmark and Norway on the evening of Monday, September 22nd. As a result, an alert was declared. At Denmark's largest airport in Copenhagen, all arrivals and departures were halted after drones were spotted in the airspace. More than 35 flights were redirected to other airports.
We are observing an increasing number of concerning incidents, specifically acts of unauthorized intrusion into the sovereign airspace of the member states comprising the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, commonly known as NATO, which is a crucial defensive alliance. And this concerning development is actively unfolding in various nations, encompassing not only those countries that share a direct geographical border or are in close proximity to the Russian Federation, but also, quite significantly, it now extends its reach and concerns those sovereign states that are situated at a much greater distance from Russia, impacting a broader international scope.
None of the 4 drones that flew over the airport were shot down. The Copenhagen police stated that the UAVs disappeared. Denmark and Norway will conduct a joint investigation into both cases of mysterious incursions.
The drone incursion that we have witnessed these past few days was certainly not the very first one. There have already been previous violations of Polish airspace by both missiles and Shaheds. These incursions are not entirely unprecedented. It's just that there hasn't been such a truly massive, a truly overwhelming and extensive attack essentially on this scale before. In my considered opinion, this was indeed a deliberate attack, a very serious and significant act of aggression. It was, well, quite clearly aimed at probing the effectiveness of their tactics and the resolve of the Polish defenses. But I strongly believe that Russia possesses the capability to attempt and potentially execute the very same kind of aggressive actions in other neighboring countries as well, posing a broader regional threat.
In the Norwegian capital of Oslo, an alert was also declared over the military zone of Akershus fortress due to drones. The drones were detected by the military. In connection with the incident, 2 people from Singapore were detained.
It would be very important here, of course, for the United States of America to act more decisively, but unfortunately, so far, aside from some statements, we have not seen how ready the US is to, let's say, deal with the challenges that currently exist.
Drones on European territory are now more of a common occurrence than news. Up until now, all unidentified drones have turned out to be of Russian origin. And it is quite possible that due to its impunity, Russia continues to test NATO's patience. Lithuanian Defense Minister Dovydė Šakalienė expressed the opinion that the countries of the North Atlantic Alliance could have responded more decisively and shot down the aggressor's UAV over Estonia. She also recalled the example of Turkey, whose airspace was also violated by Russia 10 years ago.
It seems to me that what we are truly seeing here is a significant lack of political will. For now, at this particular stage, perhaps the nation of Estonia is genuinely afraid that Russia might somehow retaliate, but it will undoubtedly respond in a different, more asymmetric way, which could be quite impactful. Most likely, it could step up its subversive activities in Estonia. And considering the significant geographical reality that Estonia shares a direct and extensive border with the vast Russian Federation, and furthermore, taking into account the substantial presence of a considerable number of ethnic Russians residing within Estonia's national boundaries, this particular demographic and geopolitical situation could very easily become a profoundly destabilizing factor for the region.
Aircraft that violate the airspace of NATO countries should be shot down. This was stated by the President of the Czech Republic, Petr Pavel. According to him, only such an adequate response will make Russia realize that it has crossed the line and made a mistake.
Trump, Ukraine can restore 1991 borders. It's possible. A bold statement from Washington. US President Donald Trump wrote on Truth Social that Ukraine can return to its 1991 border, the full restoration of territory. He says he has studied the military and economic balance between Ukraine and Russia and fully understands it. According to Trump, with time, patience and strong financial support from Europe and NATO, Ukraine completely victory is possible. Is this a real shift in America's stance, and what will it mean for Ukraine's war effort? Full story in report.
US President Donald Trump made a statement that Ukraine could restore its 1991 borders. He wrote about this on his page on the social network Truth Social. The US president stated that he had familiarized himself with the military and economic situation between Ukraine and Russia and fully understood it.
With time, patience, and financial support from Europe and especially NATO, restoring the original borders from which this war began is quite a possible option. Why not?
Trump noted that Putin and Russia are facing major economic problems, and right now is the time for Ukraine to act.
When people living in Moscow and in all the big cities, towns, and regions across Russia find out what is really happening with this war, about how it's nearly impossible for them to get gasoline because of the long lines that have formed, and about all the other things happening in their war economy, where most of the money is being spent on the war with Ukraine, which has a great strength of spirit and is only growing stronger, then Ukraine will be able to restore its country to its original form.
Earlier, at a joint press conference with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in New York, US President Donald Trump stated,
The Russian economy is currently in terrible shape. It is falling apart. Ukraine is doing a very good job of stopping this huge army. It is remarkable.
When asked whether he still trusts Putin, Trump replied that he would let everyone know in a month. After the meeting with the US president, Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky stated,
It was a very good meeting today. It was probably the most substantial one.
Later, Zelensky said that US President Donald Trump realized that Putin had been sharing information with him that was far from the truth. Now the US president trusts the Ukrainian leader more. According to Zelensky, President Trump possesses very important information regarding the situation at the front. Zelensky said, Trump agreed with him that Putin will not wait for the war in Ukraine to end. He will try to find weak spots in Europe, in NATO countries. After meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron, Donald Trump stated that his relationship with Putin meant nothing.
Zelensky, stronger air defense will force Putin to seek ceasefire. Ukraine's skies hold the key to peace. Speaking at the UN Security Council, President Zelensky declared that strengthening Ukraine's air defense will make Putin think twice and may even push him toward a ceasefire. After talks with US President Donald Trump, Zelensky said he expects America to take bold steps to pressure the Kremlin into ending the war. What moves can Washington make and how close are we to forcing Russia's hand? Full story in our report.
On September 23rd, the high-level general debates of the UN General Assembly began. This year, over the course of a week, presidents and prime ministers from about 150 countries will address the world from the podium in New York. Among the first to speak, as is tradition, was the leader of the White House, Donald Trump. Russia's war against Ukraine and methods of pressuring the Kremlin were among the top topics in his speech.
China and India are the main financiers of the ongoing war, continuing to buy Russian oil. But, strangely enough, even NATO countries have not blocked a significant portion of Russian energy and energy carrier supplies. As you know, I found out about this about 2 weeks ago and I was not happy about it. Just think about it. They are financing a war against themselves. Who the hell has even heard about this? If Russia is not ready to make a deal to end the war, then the United States is fully prepared to impose a very high package of powerful tariffs, which I believe will very quickly put a stop to the bloodshed. But for these tariffs to be effective, European countries, all of you gathered here now, must join us and adopt exactly the same measures.
Europe is ready to completely give up Russian energy resources and continue supporting Ukraine. This was stated on the sidelines of the General Assembly by both EU representatives and the leaders of individual countries. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, spoke about sanctions on resources from the Federation during a personal meeting with Donald Trump.
President Trump is absolutely right. We are working on this. We have already significantly reduced gas supplies from Russia, completely stopped importing Russian coal, and have greatly reduced oil imports. But some things are still making their way to the European continent. That's why we are now imposing sanctions on those ports that, for example, receive LNG from Russia, and we want to introduce tariffs on oil supplies that are still coming into the European Union. We want to get rid of these supplies.
Ukraine has repeatedly stated that it is ready for a ceasefire and is open to negotiations. Now Russia must prove that it can choose peace, despite the fact that it continues to increase attacks on Ukrainian civilians and provocations. At the same time, France will firmly stand by Ukraine, together with its European partners and all those who understand the importance of defeating Russia to preserve the world order. And I welcome the statement made by the President of the United States of America, in which he reminded us of the gradual weakening of the Russian economy.
I discussed several promising ideas with Donald Trump to bring peace closer, and I hope they will yield quick results. President Volodymyr Zelensky said this following talks with the head of the White House. He did not specify exactly which ideas were being discussed. During the public part of the meeting, Donald Trump stated that the Ukrainian armed forces are successfully stopping the Federation's army, and given the weakened Russian economy, Kyiv, with the support of the EU, will be able to reclaim all occupied territories. In turn, Volodymyr Zelensky noted, quoting Trump, "This is the person who can fundamentally change the situation."
I will tell Mr. President and his team about what is happening on the battlefield. We have good news. Of course, above all, we want to stop the war with your help. During this war, we need more pressure, more sanctions. I hope, first and foremost, with the United States and Europe. But we support your idea, Mr. President. I want to discuss it. how to stop certain European countries, how to deprive them of the opportunity to buy Russian oil and gas.
During a joint press conference with Volodymyr Zelensky, Donald Trump also stated that NATO countries should shoot down Russian planes if they invade their airspace. Not only was the end of Russian aggression discussed at the UN General Assembly, but also the return of Ukrainian children who were abducted by the Federation. Thanks to the Bring Kids Back UA initiative, 1,625 underage Ukrainian citizens have already been returned. Volodymyr Zelensky announced this. He also reported that Kyiv is launching a tracking mechanism to collect all data on children abducted by Russia.
So far, Russia has done virtually nothing, not even providing real information about these children. They refuse to provide real information either to us or to international organizations. Please let the outcome of this coalition meeting be support for initiatives to search for, return, and reintegrate our children, as well as real pressure on Russia through sanctions. The forcible removal of children from one country and attempts to re-educate them in the interests of another is an obvious crime. This must be clearly stated once again. Therefore, this crime must be stopped. The perpetrators must be brought to justice.
Already this evening, Volodymyr Zelensky will deliver a speech from the main podium of the UN General Assembly. It is also known that the President of Ukraine has a number of bilateral meetings scheduled. Larisa Petruk for Freedom TV channel.
That's all for today on Ukraine Today. If you believe the truth must be louder than Moscow's lies, like, comment and subscribe. Want to do more? Become a sponsor and help us keep Ukrainians' voice strong across the world. Your support exposes Russia's crimes, strengthening Ukraine's fight and brings victory closer. Stay strong, stay informed and stay with Ukraine.